Wasting money on cures. Forgot how to fix myself. They say that time is free. Then why is it so precious? Oh, I'll say memories in my head, like Polaroids on walls. They remind you to look ahead. Time is running out. Time is running out. Lately I've lost my track. I've sailed the deeper seas, hoping to find something to bring back better times. Oh, I'll say memories in my head, like Polaroids on walls. They remind you to look ahead. But time is running out. 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 Time is running. Time is running out. But time is running out. What if my best days are over? They can't be over. They can't be over now. Time is running out. What if my best days are over? They can't be over now. Time is running out. Time is running out. Time is running out.
Good evening and welcome to our live stream about US politics for paper 3. We've literally just finished our global politics one. We've quickly changed into our American politics outfits, put our American politics hats on, and legged it over here for your US politics live stream. And we've already got some questions coming through in the chat window, which is brilliant. If you have any questions for us, do pop them in there. We've got some activities for you. We've got some questions which we'll go through, but we'll also make time to answer some of your questions too. But I think we'll probably get straight on with some activities to start with. I think we've got a few MCQs just to get you warmed up, and then we've got some comparative UK and US stuff. And so just to sort of help manage time a little bit, if you've got some questions about the comparative stuff, maybe get those in now. We'll have a look at those when we've done the activities on that. Questions about more broadly US stuff, E30 marker, we'll have a look at that afterwards. Okay, so let's get straight on with the PowerPoint then. Okay, so some MCQs. And I'm going to get Clive, do you want to?
Yep, I can read it out, and we'll make this pretty quick if we can. So the voter turnout for the 2020 presidential election was 70, 52, 76, or 67%. So we just want to put in A, B, C, or D. And so we'll keep this moving pretty quick if we can. The clue is it's very similar to the UK general election.
We've had
we've got two correct answers. Yeah, three correct answers.
I can see three correct answers. Yeah. very
Go on,
luck.
Duncan. Reveal. Let's reveal. The answer is 67%. So as I said, very similar to UK general election. If you want a similarity there between the two nations' major elections. Well done if you got D. Second question. At the 2020 election, Biden won how many electoral college votes? 290, 299, 306, or 320? So again, it's A, B, C, or D, please. So a few answers coming in. So the electoral college that Biden won in the 2020. And
A few
Duncan,
in there.
the correct
Lots
answer,
of
as a lot of you got. Yeah.
Yeah.
The C is correct, 306.
Well done.
And next question. The percentage of votes that Donald J. Trump won in 2020. Is it 40, 47, 45, or 43%? So what percentage of the vote did Donald J. Trump win in 2020? I'm being very polite about not making any reference to Trump and his current predicaments.
Lots of right answers coming through.
Lots of right answers. The answer is B, 47%. Again, very well done. Next question. All good use should say is AO1 knowledge. Yeah. So information which you can use.
Okay, we're going to look at some comparative stuff now. We've got a number of points down the bottom there, features of a political system. All we want you to do is to determine whether they are features of the US system, the UK system, or both. So in the chat window, probably the easiest thing would be to put US and then some numbers, or both and then some numbers, and UK and then some numbers. You don't have to wait until you've got them all. You can do them as you go. We've got a little timer. So should we set the timer going? Yep.
Yep.
Here we go.
1 minute, I believe. Yep. 60 seconds.
Yep. Got some nice dramatic music.
Very, very quick response from Finn.
Yep.
Yep. Well done, Maddie. Ten seconds to go. 5, 3, 2, 1.
Okay.
So this is obviously similarities and differences, and if you like, a bit like a Venn diagram with the overlap. I'm assuming, Duncan, the next slide is going to give us the correct answers.
It is going to give us the correct answers. We've had some correct answers. I've also seen a few not correct in there as well, so it's worth keeping an eye on this and
we're not totally 100% on this.
Yeah, the constitution one was supposed to be deliberately confusing. So remember, obviously, Britain does have a constitution; it's just not written. That's something that you could use to compare them, the differences.
The entrenched against the uncodified, written in many places, written in a single document. So the US founding fathers wanted that separation of powers. A power of the president or executive is that they can appoint Supreme Court judges, whereas in the UK we have a appointments commission, and in the US the president has a direct mandate from the people. The direct comparison is to the UK, where the legislative branch is sovereign, so Parliament is sovereign. We have a unitary government, albeit with greater devolution now. Both of them, both US and UK, can be constrained by the legislature, which can be a numbers game. I've seen people already writing about gridlock. As Ciara and Duncan both said there, we both have constitutions, although in different formats. And in both countries, currently Biden, currently Sunak, the leader, is the main negotiator with other nations. And perhaps the most obvious reference was Sunak going to see Biden last week and, in theory, making some form of informal treaty about future trade arrangements between the two.
There was a good question there about doesn't the manifesto give a direct mandate? And no, it gives the government a mandate. Not just the manifesto, but if winning a majority or whatever gives the government a mandate, but not specifically the leader. Or in the case of the UK, the prime minister. If you take, they owe their position to the party that's got a majority in the.
A good question there as well is the UK Supreme Court is impartial, isn't that separation of the powers? Really, it's a good point, and I guess you could argue that, but effectively, because the power of the Supreme Court is given by Westminster, it can be taken away, and in theory, we wouldn't really see that happening, but it still could happen. They're not constitutionally protected in the same way.
The Constitutional Reform Act 2005 did increase the extent to which we have a separation of powers in the UK, but parliamentary sovereignty sort of prevents it from being a sort of full separation of powers, and obviously there's still things like most of the executive, well, all of the executive sits in the legislature, so there isn't a sort of full separation of powers, but there is more than there used to be. I mean, interestingly, when the US founding fathers wanted a separation of powers, part of their rationale for that was we ought to do it like they've got in the UK, but we didn't have it. They were wrong about the UK. But okay, great stuff. Someone's asking there, will we go through any predictions? We won't be predicting any questions. More jobs with unless you actually know what's on the paper, you can't. Don't know. I'll tell you what. We'll come back to this one in a minute. Let's go back to the. Let's go back here for a minute and pick a few questions. So let's just pick a few of these. How much do we need to talk about the theories? And then there was another theory question there later. So this is your comparative theory in your second 12 marker for the US, and the kind of cap, if you like, for talking about it at all is for the top band. So you can't get more than 9 out of 12 if you haven't addressed theory in this question. So in that sense, it's a bit like component 2 synoptic links in terms of where the cap's sitting. So I think the answer therefore would be it's a good idea to try and bring some in. I wouldn't go too much trying to shoehorn it into every point you make, but if you can make some, if where it's relevant and where it is, do talk about comparative theory and try and make sure that you have some in there. A linked point to that is, can you do 2 of the same comparative theory in a 12 marker? Yes. So if the same comparative theory was relevant for 2 different points that you were making, then absolutely you could make that link to the comparative theory in the same comparative theory.
I think the advice really is please don't lose sleep over it, because you're going to get 9 out of 12, you're doing pretty well. But obviously, if you can make a reference to either structural, cultural, or rational theory, then it does open up the doors for you getting some more marks. But it is something which you will almost certainly include, almost without thinking about it. But just if you do say this is a good example, perhaps separation of powers of the structural theory and the way things have been set up, and if you want to just underline the word structural, so whoever's marking it is absolutely with no doubt that you have made that point. But as Duncan said, you don't necessarily need to make it in for each point. But please,
not necessarily.
If you want to try and aspire to an extra potential 3 marks, then it is worth mentioning. I always find the structural theory the one that I personally would use the most.
Yeah,
but that may well be down to me.
Again, it might depend slightly what the question is, but it's probably the one that straightforwardly, that kind of constitutional differences, rules-based differences between them. It's probably
Jackie D. I totally agree. I think structural is the one that it tends on past questions, without predicting future questions, the one that is the most natural fit.
Yeah, absolutely. But I suppose if it was something about like turnout or participation or something, then it would be more potentially more cultural. If it was, you could bring in, the other for something about the role of the president and prime minister or something potentially. In terms of the individual humans doing the job. We've just a good example of how you can sort of answer questions for each other in the chat window, which I always love people doing. It's great. It saves us having to do it. It's a good thing. So has anyone got an example of divided government making it hard for a president to get bills through? And then we had throughout almost the entire of the Obama administration, the Republicans controlled the House and the Democrats the Senate, resulting in 2 terms of divided government. And then we've got things about gridlock and the federal shutdown 2018 to 2019. I just really like the fact that people are answering each other's questions there. That really we always love you doing it. It's great to see. Okay, shall we go back to the presentation? Someone says, is comparative theory always obvious to examiners? I think that's why Clive was saying possibly underlined or whatever. But if you use the words, structural or whatever, then cultural, then yes, the examiner will recognise that you're applying the theory there. Okay, a little bit about the about Congress now and representation in Congress. We've got a higher or lower.
I think Ciara devised this. Was this yours, Ciara?
Could well be.
This your masterpiece from
No.
last year?
Okay. Is it not? Might have been me.
Oh, maybe it is.
Might be.
Let's.
Yeah.
It's
Okay.
it's a bit like a game show, isn't it?
Got higher or lower. So you just say, is it higher or low? So we start with the percentage of African Americans in the Senate, and it's 2%, which is not.
Which is woeful, isn't it? Absolutely woeful.
Absolutely.
Of course, when percentage is always easy for the Senate because there's 100 of them. So it's
two out of 100.
Yeah. So what about African Americans in the House of Representatives? Is that higher or lower than 2%?
Yeah, you can just put H or L if you want to.
And lots of people have come in
with higher
already with higher, and
they would be right, wouldn't they?
Indeed, it is quite a bit higher, although still not.
Not right.
not extremely high, but it is quite a lot higher. Yeah. Okay, what are we after next? Women in the Senate. Is that higher or lower than 13%?
So question 2, higher or lower?
Yeah,
got to be 13% to be higher.
Is it higher than 13%? Lots of people going for higher.
Yeah.
You would think it would be, wouldn't you?
I think they're going to be right. I'm going higher.
26%. So it is higher. It's still remarkably low when you think what percentage of the population are women, but it is a lot higher than 13%. Women in the House of Representatives. Is this higher or lower? What do we think? So a couple of people coming in with higher. Again, you might expect it to be higher. Some people are giving specific numbers.
Yep. However.
Yeah, it is actually lower.
Yeah.
Yeah. It's interesting and slightly surprising.
I think question 4 is a comparison.
Women in the UK House of Commons. Actually, someone's just asked an interesting question. Has this been updated since the midterm elections? I might double check that one for you. That's a good point. That is a good question. Sorry, that's a very good point. Yeah, there will have been some change since then. That's a good point. Women in the UK House of Commons. This is the up to date figures. We'll get you the other ones. Lots of people saying higher, and absolutely it is quite significantly higher. Yeah,
but still woefully low. Still woefully low.
Okay, we'll just I'm just going to double check some of those figures for you while we also talk about the presidency. That nice debate about is it an imperial or an imperiled presidency. Do you want to start having a little chat about that while I have a quick check on the
just in case anyone's talking over that. Just in case anyone's not overly familiar with the term imperial. It's the idea of it being a dominant presidency. So, in what way is the US president at the top of the party, if you like, and dominating American policy, and the opposite being imperiled even. So, any ideas? Any ideas? I'm beginning to see some great answers already.
And this is important for AO3, obviously, right? So we're thinking about judgment, we're thinking about arguments for and arguments against, because part of judgment, AO3, is about a balanced argument as well as a strong opinion.
Yeah, some super answers. I like Arthur's answer though. It's just gone through.
Yeah,
And
can we
then
be specific as well, right? So can you? So someone's mentioned Bush. What about Bush?
yeah, yeah. How far back would you go, Kira? Would you go back to? I got an age problem here, where I realise now when we did the cinema or whatever, and I was kind of referring back to 2001 and the importance of 9/11, and students pointed out they weren't even born in 2001, and I suddenly realised, yeah. So would you say there's a timeline you would go back for this sort of question? Would you go
I
back as
think
far as Bush one?
Yeah, I mean, it depends really. It's about the example that fits best.
Yeah,
More recent is obviously a better example, but if you can't find a more recent example to exemplify a point or an argument, then obviously an older
yeah,
one would work. But with something like when we think about imperial presidency, you're thinking, well, typically in the more kind of recent presidents, right? So
yeah,
Obama is good to go back to. Bush, I would go back to Junior as well to kind of think
yeah,
across successive presidents in that sense.
yeah, yeah. I tell you what, some of these answers are absolutely stunning,
Yeah,
and
definitely public approval, so important, right?
yeah, and Duncan has also updated those
Some of them, I'm just,
percentages. Okay, beg your pardon.
some of them, I'm getting there.
Yeah,
Okay.
Yeah, united government, yeah, being able to pass
yeah,
legislation, yeah.
yeah. And obviously, the executive orders is a key presidential power.
And we saw definitely have seen a rise of those under Trump, but of course they don't last beyond that kind of
Yeah,
presidency. So that's quite it doesn't count if it doesn't last or doesn't make a kind of permanent change.
yeah. Again, some fabulous answers. I like Jim Duncan's there. That eventually, maybe they become imperiled because all political careers end up
Very good
perhaps,
point.
yeah, Obama second term exactly. Like the term there also that may become a lame duck president.
Hmm.
Yeah.
Shall we have a look what we put?
Yeah, I tell you what, we got
Yeah,
a couple of good answers. Whoever originally
yeah.
wrote
There's
them,
some. Yeah,
but
these are
they've
some
also
excellent ones. Yeah,
lots of stunners there. Yeah,
yeah, yeah. So those are more general, but people have given some really good examples of it, which is always really useful, and that's what you need. You do need those
yeah,
examples. Yeah, some really good ones there. What about imperiled then? What about the other side of the argument
yeah.
that the
So
the
it's
pres
constraints, really, isn't it? It's
yeah
constraint on presidential power. And one of the things which you can always think about is context. And one of my favourite five-letter word is media, and how the media may portray a president. If you are American and you watch CNN as compared to Fox News, you get two very different perspectives on who the current president is. Yeah, fantastic. Yeah, unable to pass unilateral foreign policy. Great answer. I got a question there for Oliver Parsons. Will you be penalised if you don't add examples? My answer would be is you don't get penalised, but you don't get credited. So if you can put recent, preferably, but suitable examples, then you will pick up more marks on AO1 for your knowledge. Yeah, great one about again Arthur, my friend Arthur, Senate having to confirm all Supreme Court appointments. Very cool. Is that Angel in the background?
it is. Sorry,
Yeah.
yeah.
For those who don't know, Angel is Duncan's dog, who he decided would make a very suitable prime minister last September. Yeah.
Right. Just while we're doing this, I'm gonna just say, because I've updated the some of the data, which I can't remember. It was spotted was out of date because of it was from the data was from before the last midterm elections. So the Senate up to date numbers: 25% of senators are women. 29% of House of Representatives members are women. So changed around a bit from the one data that we had from before the midterm election, although the general point that it's still pretty low and lower than the UK House of Parliament is still true. 13% of members of the House of Representatives are black. I don't think that's changed much from the data we had before, but there is a third senator now. So yeah, that's but still pretty low. Okay. So sorry about that.
Yeah. I think our answers are again supportive of what's gone before from the students. The students are doing great answers.
Yeah.
What do we put, Duncan? Go on.
I'll just
what
get
do we
there
put?
for. Let's have a look. It's good to hear that, Jim. So there's a point about the sociology paper today. I have. That's good to hear. Okay, very similar points, I think.
Yeah.
But people have done some other really good ones too. Yeah.
I mean, a lot of this is to do with the balance between the three main bodies, between the executive, legislature, and the judiciary, isn't it? So a great point there about the Supreme Court, which can rule executive orders as being unconstitutional, which going back to comparison is different to the powers of the UK Supreme Court. So fabulous point made there. And at the end of the day, also Congress controlling the funding, which is obviously a huge limitation. And the big battle over the last few weeks over eventually coming to a bipartisan agreement over the debt situation in the United States.
Yeah, and Jackie said he finds a lot of things comes back to checks and balances, and I think that's it. It's like there's specific parts of the specification, of course, but it's holistic. You can bring in those other points in your answers across the specification for US. So that's really good that you're noticing that thread running through.
Yeah, and Jackie D, there was a past question where you had to analyse the comparative powers of the Prime Minister to the President. So I think that was about 2 years ago, but that's not saying it may not come up again, or that you may wish better use it at some point on Friday. Great stuff.
Yeah,
that's an interesting point. In theory, couldn't Biden do an executive order to raise the debt ceiling? I mean, that is interesting in terms of the potential powers of the office of the presidency and the powers of executive orders. But I think realistically, even though they can pass executive orders, you don't want to cause outrage with the other bodies and branches. And I think also you don't want to be seen as tyrannical, and I think that's always quite an important part of American culture. They don't want a president that oversteps, and I think that would be quite dangerous if he did that.
Yeah. Okay. I mean, and also, just to add to that, first-term presidents want to be re-elected. So some of the things they do may be with an eye on the future election that they will be facing at some point.
Very true. Although I don't know why he's not just taking it easy, relax.
No, I think Mr. Biden perhaps should maybe gracefully retire.
Yeah.
Okay, we've just got a handful of MCQs just to go through quickly.
Now you gave the answer to this earlier.
I did give the answer away to this one earlier, so everyone knows this one straight away. This is just
A, B, C, or D.
This is just to give
up. It's
definitely a warm up, and it's nice to just be reassured. I know this stuff.
Yeah. Well done, Ben. Yeah. Well done, Ben. Yeah. Spot on.
No one else is even bothering to answer it because they know it's so. No. But anyway, there you go. Excellent. Well done. Lots of you getting it, actually. Yeah, well done.
I like it.
Number of Supreme Court justices? Sorry.
13, 11, 7 or 9. No worries. 13, 11, 7 or 9. Yeah, it's got to be an odd number.
It's definitely an odd number. Yeah. I was about to make that joke.
Yeah. Lots of people, again, correctly identified that as 9. Just out of interest, because obviously it could be a comparative question, how many are there in the UK Supreme Court?
Ooh, I know this one.
Just see if anyone types it in there. How many
But
Supreme
also
Court
with the
justices in the
US
UK?
one, a key difference: how many are pro-Democrat, how many are pro-Republican, which is totally different. The British.
Absolutely.
And what do you call someone who is neither?
Yeah, well done. Lots of people spotting 12 in the UK.
Yeah.
Where does executive power sit in the US Constitution?
Yeah, well done, Finn, and well done, Ben.
Yeah, people got the balance as well now. Yeah,
right.
Largely
because Trump got to nominate 3, didn't he?
Which is insane that could happen. Yeah.
Yeah.
Of course, the consequences of that is Roe versus Wade being overturned.
Yeah.
Yes.
Lots of people spotting, indeed, that it's the president, the executive power. How many people serve in Congress?
535, 650, 325, or 100. I would suggest it's not D. Could you answer that one before?
That's an interesting one. By serving Congress, what do we mean by that?
That's a bit deep for me this time. I'm getting towards Sleepy Joe time.
So the answer is
A.
That is the number of the House of Representatives plus the senators.
Thomas Webb, A star. I hope that's a premonition of August the 16th.
Yeah. So it is. That's the number of House of Representatives plus the number of senators. There's a couple of people going for B 650, which is of course the number of MPs in the House of Commons in the UK, which again you can make that comparison.
Surprised you to make the House of Lords a comment there. There we go. Mm-hmm. If you know your maths, you should work this one out, shouldn't you? The number of electoral college votes that are needed to win the presidency. So Duncan just explained how the electoral college was calculated, if you like. So we've got A325.
I haven't.
B270.
I haven't mentioned the electoral college.
Okay, D250. I'm getting ahead of myself.
Some people have typed in the chat what the total number of the electoral college votes are there, so you can work it out from the maths from them.
It's got to be over 50%, so the answer is 270.
Yeah, well done.
Excellent.
Okay, just a couple more questions, and then we'll come back to the chat window and answer any questions. So if you've got any questions about any aspect of this, whether it's overall about the structure, timing, whatever it might be, just get them in the chat window now. But you can have a go at answering these questions first. We've got a timer for these. Can you suggest one way in which the US Constitution is undemocratic? Give an example of how that is the case, and suggest a way in which the Constitution supports a pluralist democracy. And yes, it is a bit like choosing your Nando's sauce. I agree. Okay, let's have the sound. Okay. Have you got your bongos, Ciara?
Yeah, I was just getting ready. Yeah, sorry.
Bass guitar, Clive?
I do love
if you like. Remember the music.
Yeah, start dancing in your exam. Yeah.
Okay, what do we think then? So you've got one way in which the Constitution is undemocratic. We've got the idea of possible faithless electors has been suggested. The popular vote doesn't always win.
That's a good point.
Yeah. Make sure you're telling me which question you're answering. So for the hot question, way in which they might support pluralist democracy, we've got federalism. We've got I think there was an earlier point about the access points as a result of federalism. I like that. That's a nice detailed response.
Yeah.
On the way in which it's undemocratic, we've got Supreme Court justices not being representative, not being of the wider population. The example there with Roe v. Wade.
Yeah. I would think sorry, I think the overturning of Roe versus Wade could be something that you would have every chance of including on Friday.
Mm-hmm. The example of Clinton versus Trump there. Constitution's undemocratic because it's underrepresentation of minorities. You might need to explain why it does that. Okay, the Constitution's interpreted by an unelected body.
Pressure groups and many channels.
That's for the pluralism.
The difficulties in making amendments to the Constitution. That's a really good answer.
Yeah, examples of bipartisanship could show aspects of pluralism as well.
Yeah.
The amendment process is difficult and doesn't allow good amendments to pass. Okay.
Yeah.
So you've come up with lots of good suggestions there. Just a few extras. You could say that the Constitution is too rigid. Popular support for change is blocked. Example of that could be gun laws. And absolutely federalism is an example of pluralism, including perhaps ways in which we have a sort of pluralistic political culture between the different
Another
states.
great comment there by Jim Duncan again about how the Supreme Court is becoming more politicised. Yeah.
Okay, we're back. Sorry, I should have warned you we're coming back.
You should have, yes.
No one was doing anything they shouldn't. It could have been one of those embarrassing moments for
eating Nando's.
Eating your Nando's. We'd have sent it to.
We could have gone viral, couldn't we?
You've been framed, whatever. Or gone viral. That's probably more likely. Now, just looking to see whether any other questions have come through. Obviously, a lot of people have been answering the questions on the screen, which is absolutely fine. It's what we wanted you to do. But if you want to
comment hit on by Ben there, that the vagueness of the Constitution, or the fact the Constitution is perhaps steeped in historical time, gives the Supreme Court quasi-legislative powers. So the appearance of great response.
Yeah. So got a question here, and again, we might need to just sort of clarify exactly what you mean. How to tackle merged synoptic links questions. I don't know how to do it at all. Now, I'm thinking by that you mean questions where the wording of the question is bringing lots of different topics together rather than links to other like other components, whatever. I think you're meaning like a question where it's perhaps about presidency and Congress and the Supreme Court, whatever. There's bits in the question from all over the place. And I think, two things. One is Edexcel has suggested that those kind of some of the past paper questions that are sort of very multifaceted, they're not going to do them in quite that style, touching wood, what we found. But we have seen that, I think, so far that they've kind of that style question, less of it. Although it's true that we have seen them more in paper 3 than the other papers historically. I think they're still quite likely to be quite synoptic, the questions. So although they won't be a sort of multifaceted and stuff, you still may well have, say, President and Congress in the same question, or Supreme Court and Constitution in the same, things cutting across different topic areas. And I think, in some ways that's not a bad thing, because it gives you plenty to write about. That you want a reasonably broad question. The problem sometimes when it's that sort of multifaceted question is it's quite hard to have a consistent judgment throughout, because it's like, well, I'm answering that bit of the question, now I'm answering this bit of the question. But if it's a clear sort of statement that you're making a judgment on, it just happens to involve different aspects of the of the specification, then I think that's okay. You can bring them together. Although you learn them separately, all the way through you're making those links, aren't you? Because you're thinking, well, what are the checks and balances on this power? What's the the Constitution's kind of the glue that binds it all together, to a large extent. So I wouldn't worry too much about it. I don't think, hopefully you're not going to get like a question that's, I can't work out quite what they're asking here. Hopefully it'll be a pretty clear question. It's just one where you might have to bring bring in your knowledge from across the US politics topic. And
I mean, thus far this year, they have been more user-friendly exams, because last year, as I don't work for Edexcel, I can probably say it, they were rather heavily criticised for the nature of their exams. But so this year, hopefully, they will be more straightforward.
Yeah.
But as Duncan said, and someone said earlier in the chat, really is about looking at checks and balances and the interrelationships between the three main branches. And if you're doing that, then you are doing synoptic links across, whatever answer you're responding to. So it will come naturally.
Mm-hmm. There was a question earlier, and I assume this was about the comparative 12 markers. Could the Prime Minister be compared with the President? Yeah, that, if you got a comparative question on the executive, that's quite likely to be the focus. Let's have a little look. Okay, pros and cons of affirmative action.
Okay.
So there's loads of people talking about Nando's still, so I'm trying to pick the politics questions out from all the Nando's comments. Okay, so that's an interesting question area that you could get about affirmative action and the pros and cons of it, and it's to a certain extent it's the distinction between trying to overcome structural and historic inequality, and we've seen that even though we had out of date data. We've seen that with our data in terms of the Congress, but you can see it in other walks of life as well, where certain groups are underrepresented, and then there's a kind of trade-off between sort of fairness and the right person for the job and all that kind of thing. I mean, that's the sort of traditional debate that there is around that. Is it the best way to deal with inequality? So it is something that's come up.
I mean, a lot of that was based around whether universities should increase, in particular, American African students. And it's a good example, because it was a case of, should they be getting there on merit, or should they be getting there to try and put right previous wrongs? So affirmative action is a case of trying to right previous wrongs and redistributing society in a fairer way. The argument against it is, should we still be merit-based, which is a very American idea.
I think as well with affirmative action,
Thank you, Arthur.
Things like privilege and stuff, like you could argue that people who are wealthier, people who are white, people who are male, they have a version of it. So it's just a way to kind of balance it as well. But it's a complicated question in that sense.
Yeah, and there's good things coming up in the chat window, about this, about Supreme Court cases that you could use as examples, which is great. Evaluate the factors influencing voting behaviour in Congress. Again, this is a nice one. We can make kind of comparisons with the UK, of course, because in some ways, a lot of similar points can be made. But obviously, I suppose the interesting thing is examples. If you look at 2020 and then also the 2022 midterm elections, you can see some trends, some changes in voting behaviour, and it's picking up those trends and changes where probably you can bring in your contemporary knowledge. So, for example, more Latin American voters voting Republican, and why that might be. Also, a bit of a shift in sort of social class based voting over a longer period, increasingly, and this is where you can make a comparison with the UK. That increasing sort of thing with a kind of more sort of older, less educated voters voting Republican, younger, more educated voters voting Democrat, and you can make that similar trend has been occurring in the UK with in terms of who votes Conservative or Labour if this were to come up in a comparative type question.
I guess also you could add the influence of interest groups in America having a very powerful influence, and as compared perhaps to lobbying, have a less influence in this country.
Yeah, and I saw people earlier talking about PACs and things like that in the chat window, and you definitely
Can I answer Finn?
The role of the media as well. But yeah, sorry, Clive.
Finn's asked a question, when I will hold my hand up. I've had to Google it just to double check. The Electoral College is made up of 100 senators, 435 members of the House of Representatives, which gives us 535. The extra 3 are given to Washington, D.C. under the 23rd Amendment, which I've had to confess I had to Google to make sure.
Okay, so that's not the electoral. That's not the electoral college. It's the Congress, isn't it? Rather than
Congress.
Congress rather than the electoral college. Sorry,
yeah.
Okay,
but the extra 3, which was baffling Finn and me, is those given to Washington.
Okay. There's a couple of people asking about structures. How you structure. Sorry if there was an earlier version of this, or if this was answering a previous thing, the structure for the 30 marker and the 12 marker. So I think we said a little bit already about the 12 marker. No introduction, no conclusion. I'd go with what your teacher has said in terms of the number of paragraphs, 2 or 3.
Yeah.
If it's 2, they need to be nice, meaty, well-developed paragraphs, but they should be anyway. All your paragraphs should be nice and meaty, with lots in there. With the 30 marker, it's the same as your other 30 markers. Think about it as being, like a component 1 or component 2 essay. You're setting out your judgment in your introduction. You're doing your, however you everyone's got different, acronyms for your paragraphs, but you're doing your kind of paired arguments with your comparative analysis and your mini conclusions, and you're reaching a final judgment at the end. So don't feel you need to in a different way. Just going to take perhaps 1 or 2. Oh, sorry, Ciara, you finish off with that
as well about like the 2 big paragraphs, and just to say, like Duncan said, right, it's the thing that's most important is that you're consistently getting marks across the paper. So keep an eye on that time. Be very careful about that. So 15 minutes on a 12-mark question. After your first 10 minutes, just make sure that you kind of go, oh, I've only got 5 minutes left for this 12-mark question. I'm going to just finish this up quickly and then move to the next one. So just being really quite pedantic with that timing is quite important. So somebody says, should I do 2 big paragraphs for a 30 marker? It's up to you, really. Like, I personally might prefer 3, but sometimes when I've looked at essays that I've marked, it's like, well, do I just prefer 3 because in my head I like 3? Because I have marked essays that have gotten full marks with 2 paragraphs because they've done those 2 paragraphs really well. So if you're finding you've only got like 5 minutes left when you're writing your 30 marker, and you've done 2 paragraphs, it's better to cut and run with a good conclusion than it is to try and attempt the 3rd paragraph. So it's just weighing those kinds of things up when you're writing.
Yeah. Whatever works for you. You would have got to this stage knowing what is a successful formula for yourself, because there's no one that is the panacea. So whatever you do well on Friday morning, and be confident in your approach.
Right, I'm going to take 2 more. This one, the idea that the president's weak at home and strong abroad. I think it's a question that's come up previously. So is the president sort of stronger when it comes to sort of foreign policy and striding the global stage? I think you can make some clear arguments that they are. That a lot of the checks and balances are domestic checks and balances, or as they're very much the spokesperson for the US abroad, and of course the US has that sort of hegemonic power. And is very dominant on the global stage. You can do some counter arguments. The funding for any sort of military interventions and stuff has to be kind of agreed by Congress. So that there are still some checks and balances that exist. So you can have that little debate there. And then also, I think this one was, it's a slightly different question. I don't know whether it's that we misunderstood the question that was being asked before, or it's a separate question. We were talking about voting behaviour in terms of voting people into Congress. There's a question about how people vote within, factors that affect how people vote in Congress, and that's obviously a different point. And yes, so obviously kind of the impact of kind of party based voting is less significant in the US, and back to Clive's points before about the impact of interest groups, local interest because of more regular re-election, in terms of House of Representatives. There's a lot you could talk about there. So less partisanship, perhaps. Okay. So I hope we've answered a lot of your questions there. But the main thing I want to say is I really hope that the exam goes really well for you on Friday. That the questions fall in ways that you can do your best, and you can show your knowledge, and we can see in the chat window that you've got loads of knowledge and some really good things. Okay, the saying one more question.
Encore, yeah.
Have you asked it? Have you? Okay. We are
hungry.
Sorry?
All the talk about Nando's has made Finn hungry. I can concur with that.
Oh, everyone's just asking about Nando's.
From Nando's.
No, and I appreciate Friday for a lot of people might be your last exam. I know it's not for everybody, but if it is, also enjoy the after the exam and having some fun and have a really good summer. And I hope you get the results that you're wanting and needing. Okay, so bye bye for us, and very, very good luck for you all. Okay, bye.
Bye now.